set that aside. Grab our sheath back out, which is nice and dry now from our fan here. Yeah, that's dry. So we're ready to stitch. So, what are we going to talk about here? We're going to use a couple of different tools while we're stitching, besides the thinner needles. And make sure your needles can take whatever thread you are using. This is the Stitching All thread from Tandy. Okay, it's waxed in it's natural tan, something like that. It comes in this white and black. I pretty much only use this tan forever. Now I am going to be using some different thread on other projects. I'm using this up right now before I go to a different thread that I've got coming in from overseas actually. Then I'm excited to get my hands on. I normally have a small chunk of this hanging around, but I seem to be out right now of the stitching thread. My God, I can't remember the name of the thread. It's usually about this long. So I don't know what that is. 24 inches, we'll call it that. This is cuticle scissors. Learned that trick from Chuck Burrows. Any sort of really close scissors will work. If you've got the scissors on a Swiss Army knife, it works really well. So keep that around. If you got a really sharp, small blade, Ian Atkinson uses a scalpel, not a medical scalpel, but a scalpel. Okay, so, and then you'll see how much I use that product. I have another pair of these that are a little bit different. They're actually Adams pliers that are used in dentistry, because what you don't want is for you want these to be smooth jawed, and sometimes it's hard to find them. I have another pair here which are like for jewelers. Those can work. Just don't mar up your needles. This has quite a bit of wax on it. I don't think you need all this wax. What I tend to do is that you need some though. Some wax does a couple of things. Wax is really amazing. It should be beeswax. This is probably paraffin. If you're using unwaxed thread, you shouldn't be. But if you're using unwaxed thread, get a little bit of beeswax and just wax that thread back. Okay. The old classic way was with 3, 6, 9 braid linen, which is a natural product, not nylon. Linen thread, and they would have to wax that. So if you watch a guy like Chuck Burrows, he waxes his before every time, and that's just fine too. I find that I'm not as good with linen thread. I tend to break it. I just pulled that needle through once to get rid of a little bit of that wax. You don't have to do that. I find it gives me a little bit better of a finish when I start sewing. I don't mind this rag having wax on it because I'm using it for edging anyway, which gives it a little bit of a glossy surface. Let me show you a couple of tricks here. Now, if you've got a needle eye that is way too small or smaller than your thread, what you can do is, I want to show you, I'm going to do this and I'm going to unthread it. You can try to twist that tighter, get that thread down to something fairly small. You can also, there are my scissors, you can also cut that on a bevel so that you get, so you get more of a point out of it, kind of hold it together. But the classic way of doing this was to use your knife, this beast of a knife, use your knife and put it on your block here and flatten it, dragging it right off the edge. See how that flattens? Flatten that right out, usually pinch it again. And that has made a very flat surface. Now, if you're threading a needle and you've got the needle, this is for anything, by the way. I don't care if you're sewing up a t-shirt or something. If you're trying to thread the needle and it's going like this, you're gonna tend to hit the thread and bend the thread over, and it's gonna be a pain in the butt. So what I do is I've got this from other places, not like I invented this. I pull the thread back in between my finger and thumb, and that allows me to flatten that again. And then I sort of push it in, so I've got a lot of support around it. It's not going to bend over then. Push it in the eye. And sometimes it doesn't work. It takes me a few times sometimes. Push it in the eye, and then it should push right through if you have everything sort of set up. There we go. So it comes right through. Now, with this small of a sewing project, I'm going to leave the needles like this, but I will show you how to properly do it. This isn't locked. This can now come undone. If you take the extra time, pull, now so you've got it threaded like this, right? You don't stitch like with two thicknesses with leather. but you don't need it. Okay, this is really strong nylon braided, not braided, wound. Pull some extra through. I lay it down on the block. Poke the middle of your thread. Okay, so now you have the needle poked through the middle, and you pull this through like this, and then you pull those down and tight. Flatten that out, tight, there. That locks your needle on, or does a lot more to lock it on, so it's not going to go anywhere. I'll show you this when I'm doing this small amount. I just tend not to have a problem with it, so I leave this one like this. All right. Now, we have to pick a place to start and stop. Now, you're always going to have 1 to 2 to 3 back stitches when you start. It's just the proper way to start sewing. And you're going to have a couple of back stitches when you finish. So starting, knowing where to start and stop on some of these helps. Here's what I do. You think about it your way. I start here, I go forward a stitch to this hole, and I stitch all the way around, back to that hole, and I back stitch back to here. So what I end up having is a full stitch here and a back stitch at the point where I need it, all up in this area, which is where the most pressure is going to be formed. Okay? So, first things first, line those up, move that out of the way, pull it through, and pull to your halfway point. You can always change these. Pull to your halfway point. I didn't lay that down. It's okay. All right, so now I've got 2 needles. I'm going slow here, but this is the first time I've shown you sewing, and so I want to show you how this works. So now we're at a halfway point here, okay? Cool. So we're going to go forward a stitch, and one single push through is a lot like a pace. A pace is not one step. A stitch is not just one pushing the needle through. That's not a stitch. This is a stitch. One needle going through, and a saddle stitch, which is what this is called. Saddle stitch. This is not called a running stitch or a chain stitch. This is a saddle stitch. 2 needles. So one needle goes through from one side, one needle goes through from the other, and is pulled tight. All right? That's a stitch, a full stitch. This would be, if I were to push this needle back through like I'm about to do, because I'm going back now, that's a half a stitch. All right, so now I've got them both coming through the same side. So you know if you've got them both coming through the same side, one's got a half stitch somewhere. You've got something going on, okay? Cool. So we've gone through, we're now 1 stitch this way, we're half a stitch back, and now we're going to keep stitching, I guess back stitching, right, technically, all the way around until we get to here, and then we're going to go back this way. So push it back through here. Now, we now have, this is what I was talking about on these holes down here, where I used a smaller needle to make those last 2 holes, and these 2 holes up here. What we've got at this point is we've got a double thickness here, and the needles are crossing each other. Those needles are going into the leather. If you can imagine, this is our leather on its edge, right? Like so. The needle goes through, and you get an X. Unless you're doing this single back stitch here. They've gone through and they've both come back around, which pulls the threads, and you can see the other half of that hole now, okay? It was easier to go through there because we haven't doubled up yet. Now we've got 3 threads coming through here. And usually, although I grabbed that one pretty easily. Did I dampen that? If I didn't, I'm going to do it again. Some people stitch absolutely dry. I stitch just slightly damp. I like it when I pull the needle taut, that it sinks into the leather a little bit. You see how that sunk in there? I know that's not going to get rubbed on by this knife now. Okay? Alright, going back. Half a stitch. Now I'm going to do like 2 or 3 in a row. Because you can. But don't go more than just a couple. Especially when you turn a corner like this, it's hard to pull them all tight. You're going to find out, I found out about 3 in a straight line. You can do 3 full stitches in a straight line, and then pull it, and it all tends to slide. That wax is what's really helping that. Okay, so when you go fast with wax, it is going to turn more viscous because it melts slightly. because of the burnishing, the pressure that you're putting on it. And then when you stop, it solidifies. So it's doing really two things at once, being the ultra cool stuff that beeswax is, which it makes it slicker while you're stitching and makes it stickier when you're done. So it holds its stitch. All right, so we're gonna grab onto this. Oh, I violated I broke my own rule. Remember I told you I wasn't gonna lock that stitch? It grabbed on the bottom of my machinist block there and came unthreaded, so I paid for not locking my needle in. All right, anyway, we're gonna grab this and we're gonna pull it tight. See how that's still loose? Nothing crazy, don't go crazy, but see how that, boom, it pulled it all tight. Now, my hands have been conditioned a bit. I don't have tough dude hands, okay? I never have, even when I was in the Marines I didn't. So feel free to make yourself a glove, right? Now what ends up happening when you grab this leather and you sort of twist it around, you put all the pressure right down here in your pinky. So Neil Armitage, and I've seen him, he takes another piece of leather, like a piece from a glove, like a finger, and he just slides it over here. Chuck Burrows uses 2 gloves. So I'll do it with gloves on so that you see what that looks like. These are just old work gloves that I sort of rescued and put mink oil on. Ooh, that smells good. Soften them back up. So what happens is it's like firewire for any of you fishermen out there. You try to break that, yeah, good luck, 1, and 2, you'll end up cutting yourself a bit. So if you can't, this just happened, you watch me do it. If you can't find the river stretch, that's just a little bit off straight. Don't force it. You'll be pushing a new hole through, and it's going to be a pain because that's not very sharp, okay? Take your time, look around, right, and push it through. We're going to go 3 again. So 3 half stitches with this thread needle. Drop it. Hope you guys can see everything here. 3 half stitches with this needle. Now, the classic way of holding this leather while you're stitching is with a stitching pony. I don't use one. I just sew the same stuff so much over and over and over, and it's not super long runs. Where are you? There you go. So I don't need a stitching pony. Look to Neil Armitage and some of those other guys who use beautiful stitching ponies. Neil's is really pretty. He's got a custom maker that makes it. Nigel! I keep on saying Neil. I'm sorry, Nigel. I know I don't know you, but I'm sorry. Okay, so we're here. Now what's going to happen is when we get around here, we've got a back stitch on ourselves, and it's going to be hard to get these needles pulled out. That's why we keep our pliers handy. I was saying before that I have a pair of dental pliers that I normally use, but you're probably not going to have one of those around. Just, again, make sure it's smooth jawed. Coax that so I can see the hole again. There it is. Back through. Back through. I'll stop there. That should be about 3 stitches anyway. This can be the part where people just hate. Knife makers tend to only make knives. They tend to hate making sheaths. Ask a knife maker. But I like it. It can hurt your hands after a while because you're manipulating a small object and you're sort of really forcing it through. If your hands get tired, don't feel like a sissy. It's just, when have you ever done this before? And it's not the same even as hand sewing regular. I did it again. Hand sewing regular leather. A regular material where it's not nearly as hard. I better learn my lesson here, huh? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Now this is 3 times. Or as George Bush said, fool me again. The point is, I love that. That poor guy. He had to be on the talking circuit all the time. He's just not an orator. Alright, poke that back through, run it down, learn my lesson, lock my stitch in, and apologize to the leather making gods, I guess. Almost done. We're going to run right to this very last stitch. So remember, we've got 1 double stitch right there, 1 little double stitch. I'm going to push that through, and that's going to start slowing down on me. So pliers, grab it, and come straight away. Straight out. Nigel will talk about grabbing it like this and pulling it straight out. I think he's got a really good point there. You don't want to come out crooked. You'll bend your needle and just jack everything up. For any of you out there that are hand sewing and you're getting a lot of needles breaking, especially these smaller single aughts from Tandy, I have found, it is my experience, that you are not, you're wiggling them when you try to pull them through to get them through, and that's what's causing stress on that needle eye and causing it to break. So if you're getting 2 or 3 broken needles, just take a look at how you're getting that through the leather, okay? I was breaking a lot of them too. Now I never do. It's really rare. I can't even think the last time. That's gotten tight again. So grab it, pull it straight out, being careful. You hear me quoting these other guys. It's just those are the people that I've had a lot of experience with. It's not like they're super duper geniuses or anything that, you know, I'm going to go, you know, pay homage to them on some, you know, burn a fire to them. It's just that's who I've had experience with, but I also know from watching them that they have good product. So don't think that you've got to go do and pay attention to all these other people. You can do it your way a bit, but why not? My theory is I'm going to learn from people who know if I can. Okay, now it's almost exclusively you have to push it through and use your pliers. There are also times when you have to push it through with the pliers. Where am I here? Okay. Sorry, I'm off screen. Careful. I got some resistance, so I'm going to try a different direction in there. Then it came right through. I was coming through a little bit high, and so I was going to punch another hole. You don't want holes where you don't want holes. Now, when you're back stitching, you do have to sort of tighten at each one up. Okay? So there we go. We tighten that up. And that's why we leave these threads long. That's why we have extra, so we can grab a hold of it, or that's why I have extra. All right, this is going to be the last half stitch for this needle. Here's why. We want both of the threads, to end inside the sheath or on the back of the sheath, because you have to cut those threads off, and although they tend to lock in and look good, you want to hide them when you can. So I'm going to hide them on the inside. So that one I leave there. That one's now on the inside. And I've had a full, 1.5 back stitches with that, which is good. Back stitch is what locks your thread in. Don't tie knots. You don't need to. Back stitch is what locks your thread in. Okay? And then pull this tight. Then I'm going to grab them both. Pull them both tight, and there. That's now stitched in, and you see how everything disappears. It's all now on the inside. This is where the cuticle scissors come in. The cuticle scissors only matter, you get these at Walgreens, stuff like that. They only matter because they lay flat to the leather when you're getting ready to cut that. You want that as flush as you can get it. So I wrap it around usually once and pull it tight, and then push this down and clip. And usually that pops right back in, pop, and they're pretty much gone. Okay, now, because you've locked your needles on, you have to cut them off. That's the simplest way. So keep your scissors out. That little bit extra is worthless is completely worthless, so throw that away. Alright, bam bam. So we're done with that part. Well, we're almost done. As usual, we have a little finish work to do. We grab our overstitching wheel, and this is now why you see it's called an overstitching wheel. I think it's called an overstitching wheel because when they first made them, I guess that's what they used to run over their stitches. I mean, I don't know. But it's also called a stitch marker because it does both of those things. I'm just cleaning it off a little bit. There always gets a little bit of wax on it from the thread. So I'm just cleaning that off real quick. You just run over carefully. So you notice how this got a bunch of holes and it kind of looks a little bit janky. It's always going to look a little janky inside the sheath. Now I'm going to run that over to true up those threads and make them look better. It just tends to align everything. You see how much better that looks from beginning to end? I run back over my double stitch. that pushes that last little bit, and I bet you can see on film where I cut that off at. That's gone, that's disappeared. And also notice how I don't feel any thread. Skips right over it, and I feel this piece of leather and this piece of leather as I go over top of it, okay? So when I'm putting in my sheath, it doesn't, as it's grabbing right here on the leather, it doesn't grab down here. Look at that, smooth. It's not gonna rub that, okay? And that's gonna mean that sheath's gonna last for a lot longer. You won't get anybody coming back to you. You'll make a superior product. All right, so we're gonna over stitch here. So as I'm doing this, my granite block here, which is a machinist plate, it's like true to like a 5,000th of an inch or something. It's just stupid. You don't need that. I use it because that's what I had. A friend of mine got it like on sale at Granger or something. And you need a hard surface for doing leather stamping and things. I find it's good too when you're using your skiver, that you're coming down and you're hitting on this piece of stone. Find a countertop place. Go there and ask them for a sink cutout or two. They'll probably give it to you, okay? And you'll have a nice piece of the hardest stone you can get, and you can set it right on your bench. I take this and because it's a decent little table that I've got here, I put the little felt feet down here so it slides around nice for me and I'm not scratching anything. But a sink cutout will work. I've got a sink, we had countertops put in fairly recently, and I'm going to put that on like half of my table. Chuck uses, I think, an old headstone. Yeah, it's not really a headstone, but he found a guy who made headstones, and so he got like a cutoff from him. Paul's got a really sweet table. He's got this huge piece of stone that I can see, and he's got another huge table that's all poly cut off, you know, for like cutting and stuff. That's what he do. I'm taking off my gloves because we've got to glue again. I have rendered the first parts of this video already, and I noticed that part of my video got cut off when I was talking about this this glue bottle. This is one I just picked up from Amazon. It's like 10 bucks, and it holds a ton of glue. You won't need this. It holds a lot. There's another nice cement pot at Tandy that's like 40 bucks, and because it's lead bottomed and Teflon coated. So it doesn't, none of the glue sticks, and the lead bottom, it really gives it good weight. I like this one. When it's in its resting position, in between times when I'm sewing, I put it up like this, and all of the cement then sits down on this bottom. Then when you put it down, you tend to get a little bit more fresh glue. Plus, I can also tip it up here and add a little bit of thinner as I need to there. That's how you fill it. So I take this little Pinocchio nose, you know, Freudian thing off of here, and I have a brush already sitting here. That's why the Pinocchio nose is on there, to allow for the brush. This is a cheapy little brush. I need to get a new one. I've got a couple more, I just haven't done it yet. Get good brushes though. You want your glue to go where you want your glue to go, and you don't want it where you don't want it. Now, I'm putting it on this welt. We're gluing up the welt now. And notice how I'm staying away from, I'm going right up to and a little bit past the inner stitch hole line. It is not going to help me all that much to go right up to that edge with my contact cement, okay? And I don't want to have too much so that I overrun and go inside the sheath, and I gotta go sand it out, okay? And get, like I said before, the damn booger effect on the inside of there. No good. When I tipped that up, I got glue on the handle of my little brush here, so let me wipe that off real quick. Get all goobery and nasty. There we go. This stuff is strong. Make sure you're in a well ventilated place, or you have the kind of weld wood that doesn't. Now I know how far to go in here because I've got these holes too. That's my guideline. That doesn't have these fumes. If you are putting your glue in and you think that it's not going to get a good contact here because of anything that's got on here, use a bit of 80 grit sandpaper and sand down where you're going to be adding this glue so you get good adhesion. I knew a leather maker once who as a test, carried a sheath that was only glued, wasn't stitched, only glued. And it was, last I heard, I haven't heard from him in a long time about this project, but it was a year and going strong, just glued together. It used to be, I am certain, the case in Al Stolman's day and the like, that you use some glue basically to hold it shut while you stitched it, and all your strength came from the stitches. Our adhesives are so amazing now, so are our abrasives. I'm amazed by the silliest things. Adhesives and abrasives are some of them. Getting goobery. They're so strong now that this contact cement, you know, when it touches, she's stuck. I can thank my brother for saying she gone. I don't even know where that comes from. He listens to a lot of country music, so I'm guessing that it's somewhere there. I do not. He's got a great little cover band up in Michigan called Double Barrel. If you're in the Michigan area and you see Double Barrel playing, go see him. Go see my brother. Buy him a beer. Not cheap junk neither. That's my brother. All right. So just like last time, we're going to let that dry 2 coats until it's shiny. We're going to let that dry, okay? And then I'll come back. So let me put you on pause. We'll come back. We'll close this carefully, and we'll stitch it. And man, we are right there, almost done. Almost got a sheath ready to go out in the woods and cut some stuff with it. All right, so we're good to go. I'll see y'all in a little bit. I have rendered the first parts of this video already, and I noticed that part of my video got cut off when I was talking about this this glue bottle. This is one I just picked up from Amazon. It's like 10 bucks, and it holds a ton of glue. You won't need this. It holds a lot. There's another nice cement pot at Tandy that's like 40 bucks, because it's lead bottomed and Teflon coated, so it doesn't, none of the glue sticks, and the lead bottom, it really gives it good weight. I like this one. When it's in its resting position, in between times when I'm sewing, I put it up like this, and all of the cement then sits down on this bottom. Then when you put it down, you get a little bit more fresh glue. Plus, I can also tip it up here and add a little bit of thinner as I need to there. That's how you fill it. So I take this little Pinocchio nose, Freudian thing off of here, and I have a brush already sitting here. That's why the Pinocchio nose is on there, to allow for the brush. This is a cheapy little brush. I need to get a new one. I've got a couple more, I just haven't done it yet. Get good brushes though. You want your glue to go where you want your glue to go, and you don't want it where you don't want it. Now, I'm putting it on this welt. We're gluing up the welt now. And notice how I'm staying away from, I'm going right up to and a little bit past the inner stitch hole line. It is not going to help me all that much to go right up to that edge with my contact cement, okay? And I don't want to have too much so that I overrun and go inside the sheath, and I gotta go sand it out, okay? And get, like I said before, the damn booger effect on the inside of there. No good. When I tipped that up, I got glue on the handle of my little brush here, so let me wipe that off real quick. Get all goobery and nasty. There we go. This stuff is strong. Make sure you're in a well ventilated place, or you have the kind of weld wood that doesn't. Now I know how far to go in here because I've got these holes too. That's my guideline. That doesn't have these fumes. If you are putting your glue in and you think that it's not going to get a good contact here because of anything that's got on here, use a bit of 80 grit sandpaper and sand down where you're going to be adding this glue so you get good adhesion. I knew a leather maker once who as a test, carried a sheath that was only glued, wasn't stitched, only glued. And it was, last I heard, I haven't heard from him in a long time about this project, but it was a year and going strong, just glued together. It used to be, I am certain, the case in Al Stolman's day and the like, that you use some glue basically to hold it shut while you stitched it, and all your strength came from the stitches. Our adhesives are so amazing now, so are our abrasives. I'm amazed by the silliest things. Adhesives and abrasives are some of them. Getting goobery. They're so strong now that this contact cement, you know, when it touches, she's stuck. I can thank my brother for saying she gone. I don't even know where that comes from. He listens to a lot of country music, so I'm guessing that it's somewhere there. I do not. He's got a great little cover band up in Michigan called Double Barrel. If you're in the Michigan area and you see Double Barrel playing, go see him. Go see my brother. Buy him a beer. Not cheap junk neither. That's my brother. All right. So just like last time, we're going to let that dry. 2 coats until it's shiny. We're going to let that dry. Okay? And then I'll come back. So let me put you on pause. We'll come back. We'll close this carefully, and we'll stitch it. And man, we are right there, almost done. Almost got a sheath ready to go out in the woods and cut some stuff with it. All right, so we're good to go. I'll see y'all in a little bit. All right, we are back, and everything looks very shiny, very good. So we're going to close this up. We're ready to close this up. And I know what you're thinking, perhaps what you're thinking is, wait, you haven't finished in there. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. No problemo. If you wanted to use your, by the way, at this point you could seal inside here with your Montana pitch blade. Just use your finger, stay away from the welt. That's all you pretty much need to do. When we're closing this, we want everything to match up. To match up right on the outside here. So the best way to do that I've found is to stick a needle through and find the corresponding hole that it goes through and slowly walk it down, making sure that this edge meets the edge here. And do it just a little bit at a time. Give it a decent press. It doesn't have to be pressed really hard. Go up, I don't know, 10 stitches or something. Do it again. It might seem a little bit anal, but this will save you time down the road when you are getting ready to sew this all up. If those holes don't line up because you were quick about it, you're sitting in there with that needle trying to find the corresponding stitch hole, and that's not fun. All right, so we've just taken a little bit of our time there and lined all that up. And we're going to grab our hammer, and again, you can use I got my cobbler's hammer here, or you can use the soft-faced hammer. I'll use what you might have, and tap this down. What you're just trying to do is to get really good adhesion. Now, the outside edge here won't be as... Oh, by the way, when you're pounding on this, don't rock it over the edge, because any edge you get here and you tap on it will leave a line, and it's there forever. Okay? So, we've got this tapped down now. That is now glued up. And you saw how this closed here. This, where the welt comes together, is now perfectly closed. There's no gaps there at all. Okay? You're still seeing a little bit of glue from the outside. I don't have a lot there, but I have a little, which again will all come off when we sand this edge back. Okay? So put away that. Now, before we can go on, we need to dye those marks. So let me grab some dye and my little bag here. This is the same bag we used last night, so this is all dry. You can flip it. Let's flip it. Put it over that logo. I'm not getting any kickbacks from them, so I ain't getting any free advertisement from me. All right. This is what this modeling brush is primarily for. It's a stiff, small brush. Artist brush, I mean, sorry, not modeling. And we're just going to quickly run down the inside of that line. It doesn't need to be exactly the same color as the sheath around it, because thread takes up the majority of that hole. It just needs to look about right, and you won't notice a difference at all, and there's no difference in performance. So I don't worry too much about it. And that's it. That's now been chased. I'm going to put that brush in my little cup of water there. I'm going to try to just fill out. Put away the dye. I didn't use a glove, and hey, oh, look at this. See, I told you I was going to get dye on me. My poor wife. That's what I look like all the time. Rub that back to take off any excess, like I said before. And that just dampened it just a little bit. I don't find that that's going to cause any problem right now to start stitching. Yeah, when you rub on that, it usually goes down there and takes that off. Plus, it's so completely soaked in to the welt at that point. We dye this at the very end, so we don't worry about that. Okay. I did do this before, where I'd edged this back using saddle soap and everything, so that's been done. Do that before you stitch it shut. I didn't mention that before. When I was coming in from the outside, I did that really quick off camera and didn't realize it before I had missed filming it. Where is my knife? Done with the glue. The glue can go away now. This knife. I'm going to make one little quick cut. Which is, this welt never quite perfectly matches up. So I'm going to make it match up now by chasing this back. I like to have it on a slight bevel from front to back. There. Well, it's not quite right. Not quite flush yet. Almost there. You end up taking a little bit of your the outside up. That's okay. You're gonna edge. You have to edge that anyway. Okay. The contact cement is holding, but it's not fully cured. I don't think it really is for hours. So it's holding, and as we stitch it shut, then it will have all the time in the world to cure together. So I'm not gonna, the reason I bring that up is I'm not gonna burnish that right now. I don't want to separate that stuff. All right, now the rule of thumb is that you need enough thread to be at least 7 times the length of your stitch line. So here is our stitch line. So if you're very careful, you know, you took that and you measured it and you went times 7. I do basically, and I go 8. This thread is not all that expensive, and I'll show you also why I kind of want some overrun on mine when I'm done. Alright, set that down, grab my needles again. I usually find I can just pinch those. But again, if you're struggling with it, go back to that method before where you flatten them out. That's the trouble I have, is I get like 2 or 3 fibers and I don't get every, you know, part of the thread. There, I got it that time. And let me take the time to lock that piece of thread. Since I made such a fool out of myself before, I'm so embarrassed. And this is hard. Like I said, I don't have very steady hands. Well, there you go. Take that, you. Pull that, lock it down. Make sure it's locked in a nice straight line. You want that to be as sort of streamlined as possible. Okay. Now what I didn't do is take off a little bit of wax. So I'll do that with this next video. The reason I like to take off a little bit of wax is, again, I think there's just too much on there. Some of these threads, man, are just coated in wax. It's like they drowned it. You can't even find the wax in there. It's like more wax than thread. I like lightly waxed, or kind of a medium wax. Strip some of that off. I'm just running that sort of obtusely to the, tangentially to the needle, pulling just a little bit of that wax off. This one, that's better. Get rid of it because it'll stick to stuff. Not that it's a bad thing, but it'll stick to stuff and could potentially look bad. All right, poke that through, poke that through. Alrighty then. I got this huge, big. It's about 6 feet from hand to hand in me, and I'm about 6'5". I'm going to clean my hands up here. I don't want my hands to be all waxy when I get started. I'm going to put one glove on. I find for whatever reason that's the one that gets the most use. So I'm going to start 3 or 4 stitches down. I usually do 3. Okay, so there's 1, 2. Actually, this is 2 down. We can start, 2 down. Must be, I always start at 2. Halfway. So now I've got my needles at halfway again. It's hard to see. We're battling the amount of space that we have here in this video, but those needles are now halfway. Holding that on, we're back stitching now. Right? There's that last hole, which we know is made with a smaller needle. So it's going to fight you going through every time, no matter if it's no needle in there or no thread in there or thread in there. Especially with thread in there, it's going to fight you. So we grab our pliers again. Being careful, make sure that comes through that hole, pulling. Also, don't pry against your leather. That will make a mark. At this point, you're kind of hearing everything will make a mark. And it just is. So keep a clean workspace, take your time, clean up your stuff. Don't do anything that's forceful. Don't do anything forceful. I just poked myself with one of those needles under my thumbnail. That felt pretty grand. Heard my voice jump there a little bit. That was the reason why. I'm going to chase from the back and open that hole up just a little bit more. Now, this is how I stitch. This is completely foreign to the traditional way of stitching, which would have been to mark each one of your stitches, use a diamond tipped awl. It's still not going through quite right. Use a diamond tipped awl to make the hole for each stitch. Stitch a single stitch and then make the next hole. Stitch the stitches together and make the next hole. But you can imagine then you've got a needle in this hand and a needle in this hand, and you're kind of out of hands to hold this up, and then you have to have it all with you, which is like this. And you have to poke a hole. So that's where that stitching pony comes in. The stitching pony holds it. You hold the awl, usually a smaller awl than this, in there. You poke your hole through. One, needle goes through, needle goes through. Nigel Armitage is the man on that. The Art of Hand Sewing Leather will talk you through that as well. Al Stolman was the man who did that. I find I can just do longer runs and better runs using the drill press, but that is me. Figure out your way. Some people use stitching prongs. Nigel actually uses both. He uses a pair of stitching prongs, and then he opens them back up with an awl. I don't know how Ian's doing it now. He used to use a drill press, but he used a drill. Don't use a drill bit. I don't know if he did or not. I'm just kind of jumping off of that point, but use a drill bit. Drill bits remove leather. You want to punch a hole in leather. So use the needles to punch the hole in leather, because then you're treating it like a spinning awl at that point. Does that make sense? Say yes. All right, so we've got now, and I'm going to wipe this back. See how there's an extra wax there? It's because we've double stitched right away. I'm going to get rid of some of that wax right now before it gets more, because it will, and that will turn colors. So we've back stitched now twice. We stitched forward and we back stitched, or we back stitched and then we forward stitched, right? Two. So we've got the outside, the thing that might get the most pressure, right there, double stitch, set deep. I don't know if you can see how deep that's set, but I can't feel that thread anymore. It's gone. So now we start our straight line, and this goes pretty quick. Half stitch 1, half stitch 2, half stitch 3, half stitch 4, half stitch 5, half stitch 6, which makes it 3 full stitch lengths. And we chase it around. I've got kind of tougher fingers from doing this for a while, but even I, because there's wax on there and stuff, will start slipping. So use your pliers as you need to. Don't wiggle don't wiggle that needle. You'll be tempted to. Don't do it. Now we're back up to that where that first line ran. We wrap around, we wrap around. Ooh, pull it tight. I need to mention something else because something just happened that reminded me of this. Let me slow down now. When you go through with your first stitch, you got nothing that's in its way, so that one just goes straight through. Okay? Remember, these holes are round. The reason that the old timers use a diamond tipped awl, it's diamond in cross section. Okay? So it's shaped like a diamond in cross section. They would poke a hole through on an angle, and so the back end of that diamond, the point on one end gets one of the laces, and the point on the other end gets the other point of the lace. We've got round holes. So what we have to make sure, oh, we got a good example that time, is that we don't push through this thread. You don't want this needle to bisect, to go through that thread. You want it to come through cleanly so that when you pull it taut, it doesn't try to pull itself through the other thread. That will break a stitch in a heartbeat. Almost every time I've broken a stitch, which isn't the end of the world, it's because I poked it through, and it also makes for a not as good looking of a stitch. So take your time and make sure those are going through there. If you see that needle poke through, you'll probably have to go a lot slower than I go at first. This first line you can go as quickly as you can go because, again, nothing's in its way. So there we go, 3, 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to slow down here and go a little bit slower. I'm just kind of used to seeing what happens when you get one. I try to run the opposite side though, just again, muscle memory. So I can sort of tell when it's going through wrong. I'm trying to get one that goes through wrong on purpose. We'll see how good I actually am. Oop. This happens a lot on these pouch sheaths. It grabs the pouch, the belt loop. Just have to give yourself some slack and back it off. Again, that's probably where a stitching pony would prevent that. Oop, did I get it? Yep. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to get a pointer. Yeah, there's no way you're going to see that. I caught one. This is kind of the worst case scenario. If you go halfway through, you're probably going to be okay. Like, you bisect it perfectly. I caught one little stitch, one little piece of what is combined to make that. I just back it off and I kind of push it to the side. Now it comes through straight and clean. Okay, that would have broken that little stitch and weakened that thread up there. Weakened that full stitch up there. Again, so we've done 3. Pull it around. And pull it tight. And this is going to be a bit redundant. I'll finish this stitch up and then I'll probably either put you on fast mode or just skip to the end. What's funny is you watch a guy that uses a stitching machine. Paul Long uses one. I watch him. He hasn't run stitch screws. He's run a line. And he hasn't done any of that stuff, and he sets his machine ka-chunk, 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 and in about 10 seconds he's done with this. And I'm still sitting there hand sewing. But there's some trade-offs there. His stitch does not use a saddle stitch. A machine does a locking stitch, which means one needle goes through, the bobbin thread wraps around it, locks it, and when you pull it tight, it locks that. The problem with that is if that were ever to get cut, it would unwind, or would be have a greater tendency to unwind, like you see when you catch a seam on a pair of underwear or whatever, and you pull at that little thing and it all comes undone. The saddle stitch is going through like this. It's not going through and getting a wrap around and then going back around. It's going through, so each is its own stitch. You cut one of those and it's going to stop. You can actually back stitch around that, fill in the gap, and you're going to be just fine. The other disadvantage of a machine is it makes beautiful top stitches. They look perfect. They are perfect. It doesn't make as pretty back stitches on the bottom, because what happens is that needle pushes through from the front, looks perfect, but it's wrapping around and coming back through, so it's not getting pushed in the leather. It just looks sewn to me. It's hard. Well, here you go. Here's a sewn back versus my sewn back. Now mine's not quite finished yet, but you see how my front and back pretty much look the same, and that front looks perfect, and the back looks different. Doesn't look terrible, looks different. All right. And now the better the machine, the better that backstitch is. Now, you know, Paul's stuff is, and again, that's the back. So, you know, if you flip it over and you're all upset by the back of something, well, it's like looking at the inside of a shirt, you know. But he's able to make quite a few more sheaths and be a lot easier on his hands than I am. And he's making it for quite a different market, right? Some of his sheaths are made for people who make, you know, very showpieces, man. So that's set up, pictures are taken, it sits in a nice case, and that's the way that knife looks forever. And again, no disrespect to the man, it's just a different beast. Now, with that said, he can do inlays perfectly, and his inlays, of course, because they're inlaid over here, all those stitches are behind. He puts a liner. You aren't going to ever see those. I'm not saying machines don't have their place. They certainly do. I choose, for now, not to use one on these applications. I think that a hand stitch does a better job. But I am open to being wrong about that. Plus, once you have a good machine, he has a nice, Paul in particular, has a Cobra, I believe. One of the guys that left Artisan. He works for Cobra now, I'm not sure if that's true. Tippmann makes a good machine. Make awesome paint guns too, by the way. Things like that. But if you've got a cheapy machine, you're going to get cheapy results. And so his machines being really good money machines, couple $1,000 machines, and kept in tip-top shape. He has a Cobra splitter. I'm not sure if he has a Cobra sewing machine. He might have a Cowboy. I'm not sure. Anyway, those machines that are really good, they just produce really good results. I've seen the backs of his sheaths, and they look good. So I ain't saying nothing. I'm just telling you why I still choose to do hand sewing, even though I could use some of the money that I get from selling sheaths to buy a nice machine. It wouldn't be stupid at all for me to buy a flatbed, which I can do inlays and wallets and stuff like that that have an inside, that have a part that you cannot see. Artisan would be the one I'd probably want to pick up of those. Just a really good sheath. And that last hole is going to be tight, so notice how I used my, carefully, straight up and down, used my block to assist that through, and I pulled it tight. Pulled it through there. I actually went 3.5 stitches there, didn't I? Full biggie. It's getting tight. Also notice, you know, that the longer you let that get glue dry, the less you're going to get these boogers sort of forming. Now they all wipe off, but if you let that glue dry for an hour, you know, go have dinner, or in my case, what I tend to do is I glue up. You know, I'm doing like 5 of these at a time, so or usually about 3. I glue up all 3, and by the time I get back to the first one, or I can take a break and let all 3 dry well, by the time I get back to the first one, it's completely dry. So I'm doing this one at a time here, just because I want to show you guys every step and not miss anything. There's our last stitch. As far as going forward, we have to do some back stitching. Okay, pull that tight. Pull this tight, and notice how with my 8, you know, roughly 8, I've got extra to do this. I can pull this tight. Now, I'm going to use my towel here and wipe off my stitches. Get any of those that left that contact cement out of there before I even back stitch. Okay, so that's looking really good so far. Now we're going to start on our back stitch. 2.5 back stitches. Here's half of one, and I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do multiples of these because I'm trying to get these laces, these threads, to stack on top of each other so they look like a single thread. I don't want that to look like a double thread. It can look a little bit like it because that tells the world, hey, that's been backstitched, that's been done properly. But I don't want it to look like, oh my God, look at that terrible backstitch, right? Wipe that off. And there's a back stitch. You'll be able to see a little bit of a difference, but you won't be able to see much. Okay, another half. And that's the last one for this needle. That is now a full second stitch for that needle, or it will be when I complete this one. Careful. Don't want to bisect. There, I got it. I did it anyway. Don't want to bisect that thread, and look, I don't know, maybe that one you can see. It's pushed right through the middle. No, unacceptable. No good. Come back out, angle it a little bit. Got it again. So, no problem. Tighten this up. Pull this thread down. Try to get it out of your way as you can, and then try to ride the top end of that stitch going back through. Got it. No worries. Take your time. Then another half stitch to go back through here. So I'm 2.5 back stitches with this one needle, 2 on the other side. All right, so pull this now tight. Both of these now I pull tight at the same time. So we are locked in super duper tight. Boom, we are set. Where's our, I'm gonna cut this off. Put my finger out like that. Don't cut your own sheath. God, that would be sad at this point. Now, you usually end up with a length, this is going to be a little too short. If you end up with a length of your thread that's, wider than your block of that 24 inches again, I keep these to stitch on my backs here. So I leave them a little bit long on purpose. Or at least some of them. I just set them aside, and I've got good wax thread set aside. Put my needles back in there. That's where I tend to put them, just so I know where they're at. Cut this off. Put that away. I put that in there like that. I usually end up with one of my my bone dudes in there as well, so I have it with me. If I'm sitting on the couch watching TV with the wife. Actually, I don't watch any TV. Watching a movie. I haven't had the TV on in a couple of years. That sits there so I can do quick edging. Alright, why am I putting all that away if I got one more stitch to go? I want to show you this next step before I go to that next stitch. Clean all that back. There's a little bit of wax. It comes right off, but it always looks like trash while it's still on there. So what I need to do now is to run my overstitcher down this outside stitch. Okay, so take a good look at it here. This side looks good. This side looks okay. This trues up, and again, be careful. This trues up your stitches and really lays them down and makes them look right. I flip it, and I'm going to give it a little tap. There's my hammer. There it is. The theory here is that you're evening the tension. I don't know why. I just do it because Al Stolman told me. And he's gone, so I can't ask him if that actually ever worked or someone actually ever measured it. But that's the theory. Tap those threads down. Run this stitcher back around. See how those evened up? Man, they look good. I'm not bragging on myself. I'm just happy that they turned out right. Okay, I'm going to put you guys on pause. I'm going to stitch that second line, do that, and then we're going to come back. We're going to do this edging,